I was stuck in a locker for 60 hours. So, this happened when I was in high school, and looking back, I honestly can't believe I did something so stupid. My boyfriend and I would always mess around with harmless pranks. Nothing too serious. He loved scaring me with spiders, and I'd usually try to jump out and scare him, but it was all fun, nothing that would ever turn serious. Every Friday we'd meet after school at his locker. His last class was gym, so he'd show up about 15 minutes after school ended because he always showered after gym before hanging out. His locker was on the second floor, right in the middle of the hallway. There were stairs at either end of the hall, but his locker was in a pretty isolated spot. I bring this up because it's important later. One Friday I got this ridiculous idea to prank him. I thought, what if I hid in his locker and jumped out to scare him when he opened it? I'm short and he's tall, so I thought it would be perfect. I figured it'd be easy because no one would be around. Everyone had already left by then. It was the perfect opportunity. So I went up to his locker, unlocked it, and crawled inside. I even pulled the lock in with me to make sure no one noticed. I wasn't claustrophobic or anything, so I just settled in there, thinking how funny this would be. The locker had slots in the door so I could breathe, and I just waited for him to show up. But once I was inside, something weird started to happen. I lost all sense of time. I had no idea how long I'd been in there. Was it 5 minutes? 10? I couldn't tell. I started to feel anxious, but I brushed it off. He'll be here any minute, I thought. But nothing happened. No footsteps. No sounds of him coming up the stairs. I started to get impatient, wondering what was taking him so long. After a while, I was getting uncomfortable. I slouched down, leaning my head against the door. I didn't want to make any noise in case someone else came by, so I stayed quiet. I could hear footsteps echoing down the hallway every now and then, but I stayed still, hoping it was him. Eventually I fell asleep. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I really did. I was so used to napping after school, and I guess my body just took over. When I woke up, everything was dark. Like pitch black dark. I knew it was winter, so it got dark early, but I didn't expect it to be this late. The hallway lights were off, and I realized with a growing sense of horror that I was trapped in the locker in the dark, and the school was closed. No one was around. It was Friday night. No janitors, no students, no teachers. And definitely no boyfriend. Panic hit me all at once. I started banging on the locker door, yelling for help, but I couldn't hear anything back. The silence was deafening. I kept telling myself that it was just a matter of time before someone came to check on me. Someone had to notice I was missing, right? My parents must have called the police by now, and there would be a search for me. But nothing happened. The minutes dragged on, then hours. I felt like I was losing my mind. I screamed, kicked, cried, but nothing helped. The locker was small and uncomfortable. My legs hurt from standing, and I was so thirsty. I started to panic, realizing I had no idea when anyone would come for me. The walls of the locker felt like they were closing in on me, getting tighter and tighter. I kept trying to scream, but my voice was giving out. I kicked the locker with what little strength I had left, but it barely made a sound. Then something even worse happened. I wet myself. I couldn't help it. There was no way to hold it in anymore. I was so embarrassed, but honestly I was past caring. Felt like everything was slipping away from me. My control, my dignity, everything. I was just a scared girl stuck in a locker, and no one even knew I was there. Hours turned into what felt like days. I couldn't even tell what time it was anymore. I kept hoping I'd hear someone outside, anyone. But no one came. The only thing I could hear were my own frantic thoughts and the whispers in my head, getting louder with each passing minute. At first I thought I was just imagining it, but I started hearing voices. Soft at first, like they were coming from far away or from inside my own mind. Sounded like someone was calling my name. I would start to panic, thinking maybe my boyfriend had somehow come back. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. Just the darkness of the locker and the silence. But those voices, they didn't stop. They kept getting louder, and sometimes they even sounded like him, calling me, telling me everything would be okay. But I knew it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't real. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. After a while I realized I was starving. I was so thirsty, my stomach was cramping, but there was nothing I could do. In the tiny space I had, I tried to turn my body around to see if my boyfriend had left anything in the locker that I could use. Maybe he'd left a water bottle or something. But no, all I found were books. I tried reaching up to the shelf above me, my fingers barely able to squeeze between the bars. But nothing. No food, no drink. I turned back around, trying not to give in to despair. I kept thinking, someone will come. Someone will find me. But it was like I was just fading into nothingness, alone and trapped in this tiny metal tomb. Saturday came and I was still locked in there. It was the same, no one came by, no sounds, nothing. I tried to stay awake. I couldn't risk falling asleep again and missing my chance to be rescued. I couldn't give up hope even though I was close to it. I felt like I was being buried alive. But by Sunday evening I had already started to lose track of time. My body hurt, my skin felt raw from where I'd been pressing up against the locker, and my thoughts were a blur. The voices were still there, still whispering, and I was so thirsty I could barely think. I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. I just gave up. I let myself fall asleep, not even caring what happened next. When I woke up again it was still dark, but something felt different. I could hear sounds now, real sounds. Footsteps. Actual footsteps. Someone was walking down the hallway. I started kicking the locker again, calling out in my hoarse voice. But even as I did, a new kind of fear started to creep in. What if it was just another hallucination? What if I wasn't really hearing footsteps at all? But then the sound got closer. I could feel the vibrations of the footsteps under my feet. And before I knew it, someone was standing in front of my locker. It wasn't my boyfriend, but it was someone. A teacher. He started talking to me, asking if I was okay. I managed to tell him everything, how I'd been trapped since Friday, how I was dying to get out of there. He didn't seem as shocked as I thought he would, but he promised to get help. A few minutes later, the principal and janitor showed up. The janitor cut the lock off the locker and I was finally free. They took me straight to the hospital. I was dehydrated, my hands bruised from hitting the locker, and my body covered in rashes from wearing the same soaked jeans for so long. I could barely remember everything that had happened. It all felt like a nightmare. The weirdest part of it all was that I had no idea what had happened outside while I was stuck in there. My boyfriend showed up as he always did about 15 minutes after school let out. He went to the top of the stairs, looked down the hallway and didn't see me. He waited for a bit, then figured I'd already left and went home. The janitors had cleaned the hallway after school, and I guess they didn't hear me because I must have fallen asleep by the time they came through. They never even checked the lockers. My parents didn't start to worry until Sunday night. They thought I was at a sleepover, but when they realized I hadn't been, they started calling my friends. It wasn't until around 7 p.m. that they called the police, and by then, it was too late to start looking at the school. But that's when the teacher found me and everything finally started to come to an end. Looking back, I can laugh about it, but honestly, it was one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. It made me stronger, but I'd never want to go through something like that again. I think the worst part wasn't the physical pain, but the mental toll it took on me. It felt like I was dead, and when they pulled me out, it felt like I was reborn. But I still can't shake the feeling that I came very close to never making it out.